The need for government today in terms of rethinking how we can make SDG as a viable idea for growth is quite complicated. Monitoring and evaluation systems of SDG at a very early stage in many of the countries. Now, the 2030 agenda for the Government of India would remain that we work closely with the public institutions on implementation of regional and local authorities. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 5, Unit 4, second semester B.Ba, Sustainable Development, where we are going to talk about sustainable development, governance and policy. A very important topic. Why? Because as we set the roadmap for the sustainable development, we also seek to make this place a better place to live in. Now, our aim here is that we want to reduce on poverty, hunger, disease, climate change, gender inequality. We have many topics that we want to address in this modern world. But not everything can be addressed together. Not everything can be resolved overnight. What we are trying to see here is that as far as possible, anything that can be a threat to the planet, an immediate threat to the planet Earth and to the well-being of the citizens, we want to remove it, we want to eradicate it as soon as possible. So that's why instead of looking into the world spread with negativity, we want to build in the sustainable goal with all the positive ideas in the mind so that we can create better jobs, we can create better infrastructure, better oceans, energy, and responsible consumption factors altogether. Now, what are we trying to do in this SDG is that we represent a complex governance challenge. Why? The need for government today in terms of rethinking how we can make SDG as a viable idea for growth is quite complicated. Let me just try to explain it to you, because as in the government has only been a supervisor, has been a monitor in terms of looking into the policies and the various ideas that have been promoted. But today, SDG is not about just monitoring. SDG is not just about bringing in factors of a checklist. SDG requires a 24/7 active involvement in terms of understanding each and every activity, making the intergovernmental nature of work more and more complicated. Why? Because we are not just depending on government here, but we are also going to include the private organization. Therefore, this public-private partnership is going to pose a serious challenge in terms of administering the goals. Followed by, when you talk about the practice, there is also certain obstacles that we need to overcome. And why? Because whenever you make a policy, the policy looks very good in the paper. But when you want the policy to come into action, it's not going to be that easy. Why? Because people might come back and ask you this question: how are you going to make it effective? So for today, when you look at India as a country, our approach in terms of addressing the sustainable goal, the implementation are a very big barriers. All of us know what has been the nature of climate change that has been happening on the various cities of India, starting from Bangalore to Pune to Mumbai, or probably any other parts of Assam or Bihar and other areas where we have been flooded by the heavy downfall of rain. Now, what is happening is that because of this downpour, we have not been able to rebuild the cities. We have now started thinking about how to make these cities in India more sustainable in the coming years. So similarly, whenever we want to start something new, there's already an obstacle that is before the government. So today when you go and talk to the government saying that you want to build a new sustainable program, the question that comes to the mind of people is, how can we do it? How can we rebuild it? How can we take it forward? So with that, this mainstream policy agenda of making sustainability a proven action is definitely going to be a very big challenge. Followed by, for example, SDGs are not yet integrated with the governance mechanism, starting from the procurement system, the leadership skill, the competencies in terms of cross-cutting agenda and other factors. So now what we are going to come in here is that one side, there is a set of experts who know about the SDG, that's the Sustainable Development Goals. The other side, you have the common public who want to see action, who want to see that will the government be able to give them a relief in terms of better living conditions. So for the government, now the question that comes before is that how is the execution going to be taken forward? One side, we have excellent policy makers, we have think tanks, we have institutions that can come up with great ideas. But the other side, when it comes to the governance mechanism, when it comes to the executionary part, we still lack people with expertise. We lack in terms of addressing the core issues of the society. So whenever we are going to talk about this sustainable development goal, we need to keep in mind, are we fully equipped to address the situation? Followed by monitoring and evaluation systems of SDG at a very early stage in many of the countries. Why? Because when we compare India with UK or probably with US or Germany or Japan or any of those advanced nations across the globe, we are in a very early stage to comment upon the growth of sustainability. Whereas when you compare yourself with the advanced nations, probably they have set in as an agenda a couple of years back and they have been working towards with a significant progress in terms of making the actionable items come into life. Whereas for us, on the other side, the challenge still remains. Domestically, are we ready? Are we geared enough so that we can address the challenges at an international level? One side, when we talk about the India as a development nation, as a development story altogether, the other side, there are questions that are hanging before the government, addressing issues of poverty, hunger, so many other factors, including unemployment, which seems to be a never-ending trouble for any government that comes to power. So that's why I see that the cross-border nation problems or any other kind of external factors need to be controlled first, and then we can talk about sustainability. Followed by the countries that are making a considerable effort to meet these challenges, and progress have been made in many years. Yeah, they are definitely moving very firm in terms of the partnership, and they've also come together in terms of addressing the best practices which they learn from each other. So at one point of this journey, let me try to address certain things very, very clearly. The first thing is that I'm trying to look about is how can we come together as a team? How can we come together as a performing nation, share the best practices, learn from other nations, and start moving up? Sometime back in India, we had a dream that India would also have a bullet train like Japan. Today, the Vande Bharat Express, which has been running from Ahmedabad to Mumbai, has been able to set a record. Within 5 hours, they have been able to reach the destination. So today, India's dreams are turning into reality. But this has been possible. Why? Because we understood the need for infrastructural development, logistics, and the need for transport mechanisms which would connect the cities and help in the expansion of trade and commerce. The example where we took this is from none other from the country Japan. Now, that example is good for a particular sector. But what about the other sectors that we are talking about? Definitely the aviation sector is improving. The healthcare sector is making a rapid stride. Today we have come up with new education policies. Yes, this is brilliant. But then when we go back and try to understand the root level problems like that of hunger, poverty, or the unemployment, or when we talk about the malnutrition, there are still many more gaps to be addressed. So that is where what we try to say here is that if we can forge in a stronger partnership with other nations, learn the best practices, come together as a team, we would be able to address the sustainable development goals in a much better way. Followed by, let's talk about the inclusive political commitment and leadership, which is coming up in a big way. And one of the big things here is about the solar energy. I think probably every government in India across the globe have understood the need for alternative energy, and they've also started talking about the non-conventional sources of energy. Now, once when India started moving its thought process in the lines of electric vehicles or probably hybrid vehicles, let me put it in that way, we have been making a very rapid stride. We have been able to address the world, saying clearly that we are geared up for the next level. Now, the first thing in this condition is that we talk about the solar energy. Now, the solar energy, the wind energy, the photosynthesis, probably, the whole lot of gamut exercise that we have been talking about is a very big process. But is the solar energy being put into the real practice, into the real action? Now, that's a big question that's coming up. Why? Because solar energy today is being used to cook food with the help of solar cookers, heat, light factors, streets, pump water for irrigation. Of course, certain states in India have quickly adopted to this system, and they have been able to take it progress to the next level as far as possible. The next one is that we have to define, implement, communicate the strategic long-term ideas altogether. So the first thing that we are looking in here is that today's generation for the future generation, that's what we want to address. We want to see that each and every citizen need to start thinking for tomorrow. We've all been good enough in understanding living the moment. But today, we have to redesign our thinking mode. We have to, reintroduce the entire concept of futuristic living. The future generation probably is standing at a brink of collapse. Now, that is a, sad truth which I would like to share with each and every one of you. Why? Because what we have been thinking is that the resources would continue to survive for endless years is the biggest myth. The rate at which we are consuming the resources in the modern world is alarming. So we might probably end up very, very quickly in terms of consumption of all the resources, and probably there might be a day, there might be a situation where our future generations are left in lurch. So that's why we need to start thinking for tomorrow and not for today. So as a responsible citizen of a nation, it is the moral duty that we take forward all the ideas, vision for tomorrow, and let's make our country a brighter and better country. Now, the next thing that we are looking here is that how to bring this factor in a balanced manner, which means to say that one side, when we talk about development, the other side, we are also talking about sustainability. So both development and sustainability have to go hand in hand. You cannot just take one-sided role and keep ignoring the other. So we need to build a system that can probably make it far better, that can probably make it even more systematic in nature. So I'll definitely say that this is what we are looking into. The next one is that countries have also got committed to achieving the sustainable development in its three dimensions, that is economic, social, and environment. This is very, very important for each one of us to understand today. Why? Because the policy integration is going to be on this three-step factor. One side, we are talking about the economic growth. Yes, money, monetary policies are important for all of us. The second side, we are talking about a whole lot of social dimensions where we want the quality of life to improve. And the third side, we are talking about our environmental degradation. So we need to have a controllable factors in all these three so that our policies that we are going to design would definitely try to address each and every one of this issue and make the system even more interesting for all of us. Now, somewhere we also need to understand that by minimizing the trade-offs, what I exactly mean by this word, minimizing trade-off at all stages of the policy making process, we do not want to just compromise We do not want to just take a one-sided view here altogether. Now, you cannot go back and say to the governments, let's stop the technology, let's stop the development, let's stop the nanoscience, nanotechnology, or the rockets that we have been sending across, and let's just go and focus on go green. But we have to understand that at the cost of development, we cannot lose our environment. So we need to develop something potential enough that can address the issues altogether. So having said that, we are going to get into something more solid, something more creative, and something more balanced in the long-term vision, followed by the whole of government coordination approach, which we have been talking about, where we see that the mechanisms of policy, institutional coordination at multiple levels have to come. We have also been talking about the potential tension among the diverse interests of economic and social environmental issues. Now, for example, let me talk about India-Pakistan relationship itself. All of us know that whether it's a cricket match or it's going to be a Commonwealth nation meeting, India and Pakistan have never been eye to eye on any of the issue. We have always regarded each other as enemies. But today, when you see the situation of Pakistan, which is already suffering an $18 billion debt due to the floods and due to the natural calamities that have undergone, this is the time where I see that India has an opportunity to provide a lending hand and improvise the relationship. Now, this cannot be just one-way dialogue, but this has to be on both the sides. Now, Pakistan also should forget all its enmity, all its bitterness, and come forward, understand the lending hand that has been provided by India, and let's try to build a better nation, resolve all our differences, and start building a better relationship altogether. Now, like this, there are many issues which India can talk with other countries like China, like Sri Lanka, or Bangladesh, or anywhere else where India has always faced some stiff opposition in terms of the policy. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, we are all people living on the same planet Earth, and we have a same kind of requirement. So at the end of the day, we need to understand that our priorities are almost same. They are common in nature. So more we start giving importance to sustainable development, each one of us can live in this planet in a better way, in a better angle altogether. So that's why I would always like to say that this particular thought process of balancing, bringing in the government as a complete coordination approach would make sustainable development even more possible. Followed by ensure the whole of government approach, where I also go in terms of dedicated coordination mechanisms, which are very, very important today. Why? Because at the end of the day, what I see is that it's not just the government and the leaders to be blamed up. Today, when you see the issue that has happened in the city of Bangalore, it is not only the government to be blamed or be trolled about altogether in the social media. The responsibility also lies with the citizens who did not listen to the experts who had once predicted that continuous expansion of Bangalore city in the urban and the greater areas would lead to a disaster. At that point of time, we just felt that expanding Bangalore would provide more opportunities to live in as well as in terms of employment. But today, we have realized that expansion comes with a heavy cost. So at the end of the day, I would also say that the key stakeholders to this entire parameter is not just government, but also the people and the various officials who are involved in this. Now, the 2030 agenda for the government of India would remain that we work closely with the public institutions on implementation of regional and local authorities. It is estimated that 65% of 169 countries underlying the 17 SDGs will not be reached without the proper engagement of coordination with the local and the subnational governments altogether. So this is going to be a big agenda for us. India is definitely going to stand as a shining example before other nations with the 2030 agenda in mind, making the country even more sustainable and the most developed nation in South Asia. Now, what we are trying to do is that we're going to engage a wide range of stakeholders. Yes, we are going to bring in people from different walks of life. Different companies are also going to be a part of this great exercise, which means to say that this is going to be like people putting hands and solving a very big jigsaw puzzle together. And we're going to see that the major implementation that's going to happen is through the partnership with the public and private. Probably the barriers that we are seeing is that the perception barrier, which is a very big challenge. Many a time in India, we have to overcome the perception factors where we have to tell people that yes, you can do it together. You can be a person who can overcome the challenge and come more effectively all together. So probably that's the one thing that we are looking together as a team. But definitely, yes, we would be able to engage wide lot of stakeholders and bring a betterment to the quality of life. Now, engaging this will also involve the dialogue with various stakeholders and governments, overcoming the common challenges, the laws and regulations, align the policies in such a way that we are able to move towards a sustainable development livelihood. So definitely this is going to be an interesting parameter that we are going to talk about in the coming years. With this, I come to the end of the session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been spoken through this presentation would be of a great benefit to you, both in terms of theory and practical. In the upcoming session, we are going to talk about the cross-border cooperation, which is the most important and the concluding part of sustainable development. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.